Hi everyone, in this video we're going to solve the exercises from 1 to 7 of the chapter 8 of the book Principles of Economics of Gregory Mank. This is a chapter application, the costs of taxation. So the first exercise says the market for pizza is characterized by a downward sloping demand curve and an upward sloping supply curve. A. Draw the competitive market equilibrium, label the price, quantity, consumer surplus, and produce surplus. Is there any deadweight loss? Explain. So basically we have here in the y-axis we have the price as usual, and we have in the x-axis we have the quantities. As the exercise says, we have the upward sloping supply curve and the downward sloping demand curve as usual as well. So remember, when both get together, when they have the same values, we have the equilibrium point. With where all the product, all the pizzas that they are in the market at this price, they are sold and they are consumed naturally. So here we have the B. So A part, we can consider the consumer surplus. Remember, the consumer surplus, they are denoted by all the consumers. They were along this side, they were willing to pay even a price higher than the equilibrium price, but given the condition of the market, they have to pay P1 instead of paying another price which is higher of P1. So this kind of considered kind of a safe. So this kind of measure of welfare for the consumers. So this is the A. This is the consumer surplus. On the other side, we have B, which is the producer surplus, which is basically analogously as the consumer part. We can consider like kind of benefit from the enterprises. Naturally, because they are willing along this part of the curve, they're willing to offer, they're willing to produce even at this price, these quantities. But these companies that they really want to sell at this price, they don't have to sell at this price because the market denoted a price higher to this quantity, to this price. So this B is the measure of the welfare of the producer, which is considered as the producer surplus. So uh, here the question again, is there any deadweight loss? No, there isn't. How come? Basically because it's just deadweight loss where there is any intervention in the market. In this part, basically, there is a equilibrium which is denoted just by the forces of the market, supply and demand. So in this sense, there isn't any deadweight loss. So B. Suppose that the government forces each pizzeria to pay a $1 tax on each pizza sold. Illustrate the effect of this tax on the pizza market, being sure to label the consumer surplus, producer surplus, government revenue, and the deadweight loss. How does each area compare the pre-tax case? So okay, again we have price and quantities, we have the normal supply and demand curve, we have the equilibrium part, and here is the main point. This um, this like measure, this is $1, okay, which has to be divided between the consumers and producers. It doesn't matter that government forces each pizzeria. It will be the same if they force the consumers, okay? Because remember that when it's a charge, it's a tax in the market, the tax is going to be split between the participants. So in this case, the pizzerias and the consumers of pizza. Okay, so here we see here how the supply curve it goes to the left, so it reduces until this point. Remember, this distance is 1. So how we can interpret this one? So this P2 is the value that the consumers they have to pay for the pizza, and as you notice is higher than P1, but unfortunately the the suppliers, in this case the pizzerias, they won't receive P2 because this part this have to discount it -1, which is the tax of the government. So in this case it's going to be P2 minus $1, which is labeled as P3. Okay, so this is the value that really they're going to be in fact received by the producers, by the pizzerias. So here, as you notice as well, the quantities they are reduced. Okay, so here I just divided in all the segments that they are divided by these dotted lines. So we have from A to F. So here first, which is the consumer surplus after the tax? Is going to be just A, because as I said before, there's going to be consumers that they're willing to pay even more than P2 in this part, but because of the tax they have to pay P2. So in this case it's kind of saving, so it's gonna be A. So as you notice, it's definitely less, is lower than the previous case, because remember the previous case was just all this one, A plus B plus C. So this is the consumer surplus after the tax. What about the producers? Or what about the consumer, in this case the producer surplus? It's going to be F. So remember, there are going to be companies or pizzerias around here that they are willing to offer their pizzas at this price, which is lower than P3. So due to the tax, so they're going to offer their pizzas at the price of P3. So these companies, they're willing to offer at this part, they will have kind of a benefit. So this one, this is going to be the producer surplus, which is considered a measure of welfare from the producer side. So it's going to be F. As you notice, is really lower than the previous case pre-tax, because in the pre-tax, if you remember, they had all these triangle, which was F plus D plus E. So in this case the pizzerias, they just will have F. What about the government? They weren't before in the game. They just appear now because there is a tax. So now they will receive the tax, which is $1 times the quantities of 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 pizzas that they were transferred in the market. So the quantities now they are Q2. So they will receive B and D. Okay. And what about the dead weight loss? This is going to be, this part is not going to be to any part at all. But how would you can explain this CM plus E is basically all the transactions that they are avoid because of the change of the price is not going to be taken by the consumer, neither the government nor the dead weight loss. So in this case, this is a new part, which is going to be like the cost of taxation. Okay. So the C point, if the tax were removed, pizza enters and sellers would be better off, but the government would lose tax revenue. Suppose that consumers and producers voluntarily transferred some of the gains to the government. Could all parties, including the government, be better off than they were with tax? Explain using the labeled areas in your graph. So basically, I just like made this approach to this exercise. Remember, here we have the previous case, which is A, B, C, A plus B plus C with the pre-tax, okay? And here the producer D, F. EF. So government they have B plus D, right? So in this case, what I propose here, uh, how all the or all can be better off. So we can propose that in this case the prices they're going to be lower. Okay, that's going to be to P1. So voluntarily from the consumer surplus, they have to provide to the government B plus a little bit a piece of C, just one part of this C. In the other side, the producers they have to provide D from the producer surplus and a little piece of E. So this little piece of C and E, this is going to be considered the donation. Okay, so in this case the consumer surplus is not going to be A plus B plus C, but it's going to be A plus a little bit of C, and from the producer side it's going to be F and a little bit of E. So in this case all the parties, consumers, producers, and even government, they will have they will be like definitely better off. Okay, so this is like the part of donation that I propose that I have to give to the other one, and we will see that there is no dead weight loss. So the second part, evaluate the following two statements. Do you agree? Why or why not? A. If the government taxes land, wealthy land owners will pass the tax on the poorer renters. Okay, this is what happened here in this market. So in this market there is the Cleveland price, but with the with the tax here around here, what we have here is like, remember in this case which is the supply. So the supply could be the wealthy landowners, and the demand is going to be the renters. But why is kind of false this part? Why can I say this kind of false? Because remember, when there is a tax, both parties they have to split there. Remember, we have to take into account that it depends on elasticity, which curve is going to be charged more, because the curves that they have like more they are more inelastic, they are going to be more charged with the tax. Okay, so it depends, but they will pass the tax on the poorer renters. This is false, because even if the tax is just charged is just charged to the poorer renters, even the wealthy landowners they have to pay. They have to assume part of this tax. If the government taxes apartment buildings, wealthy landlords will pass the tax on the poorer renters. It's the same case, okay? Because it doesn't matter who is going to be charged. Both parties they have to contribute with the tax. They have to pay part of the burden of the tax. Okay, so it's going to be false. The third, evaluate the following two statements. Do you agree? Why or not? A tax has no dead weight loss, cannot raise any revenue for the government. So this is going to be kind of, in this case, what I say is kind of true, because even if the government they have to raise any revenue, even the little or the lowest one, they're going to affect the market. So in this case, there are going to be transactions that they are going not to be held, because there are going to be consumers that they are not willing to pay at this price, which is higher than the equilibrium, and producers they will not produce at this level as well. So in this case, it's true. It doesn't matter. There's going to be always a dead weight loss. So the other point says about the question, so consider consider for rubber bands. A. If this market has very elastic supply and very inelastic demand, how would the burden of attacks of rubber bands be shared between consumers and producers? Use the tools of consumer surplus and producer surplus in your answer. So here we have the rubber bands. So here is the case. This is the very elastic, very kind of elastic supply, and this one inelastic demand. Remember that the elastic, it means that there is a little change in price, it's going to be a larger change in quantities. In the opposite case, when we have inelastic goods or services, we know that where is a little change, where there is a price, a change in price, the quantities that are not going to vary as in the same quantities as the price, as this is the case. So here, suppose we have tax. So what is the important part here? So this one is going to be the consumer side. Okay, why? Because this is, remember, this difference between P2 minus P3. This is the difference of the tax. This is the tax actually. So this one, instead of paying P1, the demand, which is more inelastic, they have to pay this price. They have to pay P2. On the other side, the producers, and for the rubber bands, they will have they will receive P3. This is just the producer side. So what can we infer here? That there's going to be burden more for the inelastic part, which is going to be the consumer side, and they're going to be less affected. The producers just receiving P3 instead of P1. So B, in this market it has very inelastic supply and very elastic demand. How would the burden of attacks on rubber bands be shared between consumers and producers? Contrast you answer with you answer to part A. So here we have the opposite case. We have a very inelastic supply and a really elastic demand. So here we have the same case. We assume that the size of the tax is exactly the same, but here we have another case, because since the demand side is really elastic, they have to pay P2 instead of P1, which is smaller than the price, which is P3. I just put here, was wrong, sorry, it has to be around here. So in this case, the supply, so the producers, they will receive just P3. So we see here the producer side. So which is the contrast? So here we conclude that the curve, which is more elastic, they're going to suffer less than the curve which is more inelastic. As we saw in this case, we see here how the burden of the tax is charged more to the inelastic curve. 5. Suppose that the government imposes a tax on heating oil. Would the deadweight loss from this tax likely be greater in the first year after it is imposed, or in the fifth year? So I must say that it's kind of kind of subtle, this point, but I propose this answer. So here we have the normal market, we have the P1 and Q1 for equilibrium, and now there is a tax. Okay, so there is a tax, and now the consumers, they have to pay P2, and the producers, they will receive P3. So this is the deadweight loss, the white part. Why I put the demand to the left? This kind of subtle, as I said, but I propose this one because we are talking about the fifth year. So this is the case of the first year, and this is the fifth one. Why I shift the curve of demand to the left? Because, as the history says, when there is a higher price, of this good, people in general, they try to look for another alternatives. So as energy alternatives like eolic, solar, even nuclear, okay, and other forms of energy. So in this case, I must say that the demand is going to shift to the left. So at this part, remember that the tax is going to be the same. So I have to move this part, which is this size, which is going to be kept this value to this new curve. So this base of the new dead weight loss is going to be put here. What is interesting here? The point is like the dead weight loss is an area talking about like mathematical part. So the base is exactly the same as the curves. They don't change the slope because I assume that the elasticity are exactly the same in the first year to the fifth year, just the demand reduced. So here the high is exactly the same. So in this case, the dead weight loss is going to be exactly the same. But as economist, I must say that it depends. But because actually, maybe you can argue this from the part of the demand. So you will just say maybe the shift of the curve is not going to be shift, but maybe the elasticity of the demand it changes in fifth years. How come? Because maybe before people were more dependent on heating oil, so it means that it was kind of inelastic. But after 5 years, you must argue that the demand is going to be kind of more elastic because people have more alternatives to to consume. So in this case, it's going to be more elastic, and for this part, we have to take into account that the more inelastic curve is going to be charged with more part of the tax. So in this case, producers they will going to suffer more for this change in elasticity of the demand. Okay, so you can play with the answer. The important part is to answer and to argument in the best way. I must say that these both answers will be okay. So in my explanation, it doesn't change. But if you talk about change of elasticity, the dead weight loss will change. Okay. So here, the B. Would the revenue collected from this tax likely be greater in the first year after it is imposed or in the fifth year? So I continue with my hypothesis that there's going to be a shift to the left to D prime. So in this case, this blue rectangle was the case of the first year, and after the tax, and after the first 5 years, sorry. So in this case, this high is exactly the same because this is the size of the tax, which it doesn't change during the 5 years. But the base, we saw that it changes from Q2 to Q3, which is lower. So in this case, we must say that the revenue collected from this tax will be less. So after economics class one day, your friend suggests that taking food would be a good way to raise revenue because the demand for food is quite inelastic. In what sense is taking food a good, between quotation marks, way to raise revenue? In what sense it is not a good way to raise revenue? So here we have the case. So suppose that your friend were right and the demand for food is really inelastic. So here was the case. This is the size of the tax, okay? So this is the quantity, and this is the dead. This is the dead weight loss. Okay, here, sorry. So here it's really important to know that it really depends. It really depends on the position that we are in the Laffer curve. Remember, the Laffer curve measures the maximum revenue that the government can um, can increase the revenue, but it is concave, so it means it has a maximum. So if this position that we are now, we are in the left part of the maximum, it means that we can still increase the tax and we can arrive to the maximums. Otherwise, if we are in the right part of the Laffer curve, it means that if we continue to increase the tax, it just causes that the revenue will be less. So if we are to the left, it is a good way until the maximum. The seventh and the last part of this video. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan once introduced a bill that would levy a 10,000% tax on certain hollow-tipped bullets. Do you expect that this tax would raise much revenue? Why or why not? So here we have the Laffer curve. So, and here is the hollow-tipped bullets. So here is the maximum. So you need to tax size until this point to reach the maximum. Okay, so if we are around here and this guy, the senator, increases 10,000%, maybe we'll be okay because it will reach the maximum. But if the increase passes, or it just like lie in other part of the curve, it doesn't be any useful. Even if the tax would raise no revenue, what might be Senator Moynihan's reason for proposing it? So in this case, again, it's kind of subtle, but I must say that this can be alternative of decreased debts, and it costs even more in other products. So we are this can be like more in spending of government, for example. So in this case you can argue or you can talk about different points that you want to talk, because remember that this is a complementary service of guns. So when guns they have to pay more, maybe you will receive like it's going to be indirect to have a public policy in some sense. So you can choose one, whatever you want, one hypothesis and try to argue. Okay, I hope it has worth this video and really great success with economics, and thanks for watching my videos. Bye bye.